Good afternoon, Briat.
Hello, Brian.
So today we'll just jump right into it. This is the third set of 6 chapters. The first set was Karma Yoga. The second set was Bhakti Yoga. And now we're going to do, I think, chapters 13 to 18, right?
That's correct.
Which is Ashtanga Yoga.
It's the Gyan Yoga, actually. Gyan.
Why did I think it was Ashtanga?
I don't know. It's a mystery to me.
I blame you.
Right. So Gyan means knowledge.
Gyan, yeah.
And it is, or one can also say theoretical knowledge. Whereas there's a word which is called Vigyan, which is realized knowledge or experienced knowledge. It means it's obviously Vigyan is a higher level than Gyan, and Vigyan is more categorized or likened to wisdom, whereas Gyan is simply an understanding you have of something. And in spiritual life, Vigyan is actually what we're looking for, is like spiritual realization. But Gyan or knowledge is required in order to assist us to attain these realizations, although that realization is not necessarily dependent on knowledge, but it does go a far way to do it. And as we have read in the previous chapter, in chapter 10, Krishna actually says that even if one is not very intelligent and one is not able to understand some of these theoretical things, or not theoretical, philosophical and technical things, then that's not a disqualification to be able to ascend, because not everybody is endowed, with the same amount of intelligence. So he can provide within your heart the intelligence that you require. So I think that's an important thing. So if some of these things don't make sense, then it's okay. They're quite different from Western thought, so it'll definitely be new for many people when they come across these kinds of thinkings. But the whole idea behind all of these things is simply to be able to understand the way things are, to help you to understand that, particularly.
So,
yeah. Particularly,
the distinctions.
It's talking about God.
There's
a delay.
The distinctions that that you're making for me, the words that I have, is the difference between what comes first is the intellectual understanding of the spiritual distinctions of the inner world and connected to all that is, and then there becomes the experience, experiential, when you start being able to connect the intellectual understanding to your actual experience.
Right, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So,
okay.
So
sorry, you were breaking up a bit. So
yeah,
I just cover the camera so that I can understand you a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. There's a little bit of a delay, so we'll see how it goes. So we're wanting to see, or the Bhagavad Gita, one of the topics that it is getting into is what is the relationship and position between the living entity, you and me, God, the supreme source of everything, the creator, and the material energy, and what are their interactions with each other. So it is interesting the way they say that. So you can help to understand, where are we right now? Like, where are we? What is the situation that we find ourselves in? What is the facts? And also, where do I want to go, and how do I get there from where I am now? So these are like, very important things that one should know if you want to get anywhere. Like you want to travel somewhere, for example, you've got to know where you are first. Which you don't know which country you are, how are you going to know where to go, where you want to go? Anyway, it's a crude example. So in the 13th chapter, it's titled Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. And it's a chapter I like very much. It's quite technical, but it also is a simple way of explaining how the difference between the supreme spirit or consciousness, or what they call the super soul, Paramatma, and the Atma. And then also its interaction with the material nature. And it says, they're talking about there's the field and there's the knower of the field. So the knower of the field is the one who is conscious, is the spirit. And the field is the sphere in which that consciousness is expanded out and that you can know of. So that's why they say the field and the knower of the field. So the knower of the field, that's me and you, that's the soul that's inside this body. And the field is also known as the field of activities, is our body. Because we are cognizant of in our body, but beyond our body, we don't know. We cannot tell. I cannot tell what you're experiencing in your body. I can deduce by inference or by compassion or by some other methods, but I cannot know experientially directly what you are experiencing and thinking and things like that. So similarly, let's say even with regards to inanimate or not inanimate, dead matter, unconscious matter, then that's even more applicable there. So this is the field and the knower of the field. And then Krishna says, but there is a second knower, which is the super soul that's in the heart, like which is God, or in the Christian tradition they'll say the Holy Spirit, which is present inside every atom of every living of everything in the creation, as well as within the heart of every living soul, of every soul. And but the difference, there's a distinction between these two knowers, is that the one is present, the field consists only of this individual body that you inhabit, and the field of the super soul is everything. That everything is its field, and he's the knower of that field. That means that the super soul is completely cognizant and experiences everything in my body, in your body, in every body of every single living being, as well as unconscious matter, so-called unconscious matter. So this interconnectivity that we feel, especially when we're more of an awakened state, is actually, it's the super soul that one can actually appreciate, that connects everything together, and that in fact everything is connected together, and that connection is the super soul. It's that same, the super soul is like it's like the rays of the sun, and the sun is present everywhere through its rays, and in that way the sun is present throughout the whole universe. So we can appreciate it like that. But the distinction is again that we are limited just to knowing this one single body, whereas the super soul is cognizant and aware of everybody, all the bodies. And you cannot become the super soul. Like, we are what we are. We are these individual souls. We cannot, by some process, become the super soul or become God. But we can become God-like, and that's what yoga is all about, is to develop godly qualities that manifest. Okay, so he's explaining in the 13th chapter, they're discussing these principles. And there's just one verse I want to say, which I think is really interesting. And they're talking about the field of activities and its interactions. The 5 great elements, which is the ether, air, water, fire, and earth, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, and the mind. Now, the 10 senses means that we have 5 working senses, and we have 5 knowledge acquiring senses. So the knowledge acquiring senses, if you can look at it in biological terms, would be the afferent and the efferent pathways. If anybody maybe remembers from high school biology, that the one pathway is where information comes into your senses, and then your senses tell your brain what is happening. So that means you're seeing, it's giving you information of the environment around it, which means you're seeing something, you're smelling something, you're tasting something, you're touching something, or you're hearing something, some sound. So these are knowledge acquiring senses. And then there are working senses, which is that your brain is doing something and your senses are acting, and it's having an interaction with the external world. It's exerting a force on the external world. And this is speaking, it's going out. There's speaking, there is walking, there is the arms as well, working, and there's also the evacuating organs, and then as well as the genitals for procreation, and they're also interacting like that. So these are the 10 senses. In Sankhya Yoga, they speak about these a lot. And then Okay, so
Yes.
the 10 senses, the mind, the 5 sense objects. It means these 5 things which your senses can actually detect, you know, sight, smell, scent, etc. Desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and convictions. All these are considered, in summary, to be the field of activities and its interactions. So I think it's very interesting, and it's something that, you know, one can study for a long time to think, what does this actually mean? And you can take any one of these elements, and they can become a whole topic of discussion, like what the senses are, and like coming into understanding of what they are and how they work and how they affect us and how we can use them, and how one relates to the senses when one is in a position of being conditioned, so then the senses control and dominate you, or how you are in a liberated condition where you're free from the senses and you simply direct the senses according to what you need spiritually and what you maybe need to maintain your physical existence, but otherwise they don't dominate you. So then these are nice conversations to be had. Okay, so moving on to the 14th chapter. So in the 14th chapter, Krishna is talking about the modes of nature. So there's actually a couple of chapters where he mentions the mode of nature, but here particularly, he's starting to uh, bring this whole understanding of what the modes are into the dialogue. So I like this very much because modes of nature is something you can see immediately. If you just can understand what the qualities are, it's very easy to apply it in a way that that you can perceive it in your reality. And it's such a simplified way. At university, when I was still lecturing there on different bhakti yoga teachings, I had this presentation called Yoga Psychology, which is how the way I packaged the 3 modes of nature, because it can be applied like that, yoga psychology. And it's very nice. You don't need to be able to read a lot to be able to, it's quite intuitive as well. Anyway, so these modes of nature, Krishna describes, so I can give a little bit of an idea um, what Krishna is explaining in terms of the modes of nature. For those who don't know what that is yet, they are in Sanskrit, they're called triguna, which means 3 qualities. And these 3 qualities, they're controlling and governing all the activities and everything that happens in this material world. And it's like a very...
You're talking about the guna.
Yeah, the gunas, the modes of nature. And it's like the 3 primary colors that mix together to produce the whole spectrum of visible light. So similarly, the 3 modes,
That's a
mix
really
together.
good analogy.
Yeah, it's really clear, isn't it? And then they mix together and they produce all the varieties that we see in this world. So, and they're known as goodness, passion, and ignorance. And their Sanskrit names, for those who are interested in that, is sattva-guna, raja-guna, and tama-guna. Okay, or you can say sattvas, rajas, or tamas. One can also say guna means quality. It also means rope. So, which means it's that which binds you into this material existence. So it's also a type of attachment. Whereas tama-guna, the mode of ignorance, is like a iron. No, it's like an iron. How does it say? It's like a crude, fibrous kind of rope that binds you. And then the mode of passion is a more elevated type of rope. It's like an iron rope. And then the sattva-guna is like golden chains. Like you're bound by golden chains. So you're still bound, but just the quality of the chain that bounds you is different. You know, it might be more prestigious in a sense, but still you're bound just like everybody else. And so when one is conditioned by the mode of ignorance, then one is conditioned by suffering, and just your whole consciousness is just really compressed and dense, and you can't really perceive really far outside of your immediate kind of surroundings. Where in the mode of passion, you're conditioned by desire. You just complete, your whole consciousness is consumed by one desire after the next. So many things that you want to do, so many things that you'll never end up ever getting to starting. And also, when you're busy engaging with something, you're already thinking about the next thing. Like while you're eating, you're already thinking about something else that you need to do or want to enjoy. And it's all about enjoyment. And even so much so that I'm sure many people have experienced this, that when you're eating, after you've finished eating, you don't even know what that just tasted like, because you weren't present while eating it. And if somebody says, if you think, what does this just taste like? Like, I don't know. I forgot to look. So
Mm.
but in mode of goodness, you can actually tell exactly, oh, it had these amount of flavors in it, and it was cooked like this, and it was really nice. So in the mode of goodness, one is conditioned by a sense of happiness. That this happiness that you get from the mode of goodness, which is a natural quality of goodness, peace and happiness, also conditions you because it makes you feel that everything is okay. I don't need to do nothing. Everything's fine. So which means that you're going to take birth again. You're still going to remain in this material existence because you don't feel a need to work on yourself to ascend spiritually. You think everything's fine. So that's mode of goodness.
So, so you're talking about sattva,
Yes.
and that you're talking about that you're just feeling peace and content.
Yeah.
And I had it down as sacred. So you're pointing to that it can be just being peaceful and content.
Yes. Yes. Like being in the present moment immediately will bring some kind of peace and happiness, right? So that's what mode of
Okay.
goodness is. So that does not mean you're spiritual. It's a prerequisite for engaging in something spiritual. Because if you're not in the present moment, that's the only moment that really exists. So that's where your work needs to happen. But it is not spiritual in and of itself. It's just like, for example,
So it's
vegetarian.
also so it's also being in the moment. It's being present.
Yes, yes. So
So
goodness,
is that the greater quality?
no, they all go together. I don't think the one's a greater quality than the other.
No, I don't mean of the three. Describing sattva, would you say that it's being in the moment?
Oh yes.
What is the greater quality?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, being in the moment is if you're in the mode of goodness, then you're in the moment. If you're in the mode of passion, you're in the future, planning and scheming. And if you're in the mode of ignorance, then you're in the past. And then also in another way, the modes, passion is what creates. Creation happens out of passion, and all kind of creative activities is passion. And then mode of goodness is what maintains it, and it's what's required for maintenance, which is oftentimes why it's easier to start a project than it is to keep a project going. It's because starting a project you need mode of passion, but to keep it going you need mode of goodness. That is a bit harder for most of us because we're not in the mode of goodness naturally. It's said that this planet is predominated by the modes of passion and ignorance, that goodness is not something commonly found. You really have to put an effort into making the goodness in your life. And then the mode of ignorance is what destroys. So these are three natural functions of the universe, creation, maintenance, and destruction. And then, and for those who are interested, I'll just briefly mention it. Later talks, we'll get into that more. But each of these modes are controlled by a personality. Brahma is the presiding deity over the mode of passion. Shiva controls the mode of ignorance. And Vishnu controls the mode of goodness. So that's just for interest, just putting that there to hopefully stimulate some questions.
Shiva. So Brahma is about passion and the future. Is that what you just said?
Well, it's not necessarily that he's like in the future, because he's although he's controlling the mode of passion, that does not mean that he's like under the control of the mode of passion. He's just the one that controls that energy, and certainly he needs to use that energy because he's the one that engineers this whole creation. He's given the resources.
And it really is how the three come together. Is that like when you're talking about mixing the primary colors, it really is having how the three come together for you and how you're using them. That's really quite distinct, and there's using the analogy of the colors, you just keep adding drops of a certain color and it has an effect.
Yes.
So it really is specific, very, very specific. Okay,
so then towards the end of the chapter, in chapter 14, then Arjuna asked a really interesting question. He asked Krishna, "Oh my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these three modes? What is his behavior and how does he transcend the modes of nature?" So he's saying, what does a person look like who has become freed from these influences of these modes? And also, how do you become free from them anyway to begin with? So then, Krishna then he gives some interesting pointers, and he says like, one who is, I think I'll just read this because this is quite inspiring for me. It says, O son of Pandu, this is Arjuna, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal towards the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature. So it's a beautiful description of somebody who has really become freed from all these things which have been described are actually just mental concoctions, which we're buying into this duality of everything. Whereas the soul is actually existing above duality. There's happiness and distress, friend and enemy, like saying this is this and that is that. But actually all these things, they just interact with the body, and they interact with the subtle mind, and they interact with the elements of nature. But the soul is actually just observing them. But by falsely identifying with the body as being yourself, you think these things are happening to you. And therefore, you must be controlled by the modes of nature, because the modes of nature control your body. So if you think you're this body, that means you've submitted yourself under that control. But if you've become freed from this conception, this bodily conception of life, and I'm not this body, I'm a spirit soul. Now you're not identifying with the body anymore, so that means the modes are not influencing you anymore. The mode still influences the body and all these things, but your consciousness is now removed from that. And a nice analogy that is given is like if you have a coconut, and you take a nice green coconut and you smash it with a hammer, what happens is the whole thing splits apart. And you have these two halves, and there's flesh in both. But if you have a coconut that's been dried up, what happens is the pulp on the inside, it pulls away from the shell on the outside. So if you then smack that shell with a hammer, it breaks open, but the pulp in the middle remains whole. So a person who's become detached from the modes of nature is like that. The modes of nature will hammer that shell of the coconut, but you, the soul inside that's now detached from the cell, that bodily concept of the shell, the bodily conception of life, you're not being affected by those modes anymore. So it's a very apt analogy to describe like that experience.
I just want to put that into my words. Our data seem to equalize. So I'm going to jump in. You're talking about a monk, as far as I'm concerned, that's the description I would give to somebody that has stopped being interested in the meaning, adding meaning to everything that's going on in the world, worldly endeavors, and the worldly endeavor machinations. And you're saying when you're neutral to these things, and you're no longer looking to get somewhere, and just accepting what's going on and accepting the nature that you are, there's you can be connected and be a wholeness that you are. And really a monk's like I find it difficult being a spiritual person and also having a business, is that I can do it to degrees, and I'm definitely much less attached to the meanings of how results are, but it's very difficult to be able to make that split entirely. I'm still working on that.
Yeah.
How are you faring with that, in being able to be neutral to dirt and gold in the same way?
Well, when in my 7 years of being a monk, it was very different than it is now, being married with children. Than one would expect.
That's a comedy, by the way.
Yeah. So as being a monk, I would say that kind of thing is much more internal, because you've already externally given those things up. I mean, I had a laptop, I had a phone, but only as far as I needed it for my outreaching activities. But otherwise, I didn't need them, and I didn't really use them. So like nobody phoned me to ask for money or for, you know, something like that, because I didn't have it. I didn't have it. So, but it was more like internal, like, because the desires are still there, but at least I'm not interacting with them. So then, but now being married, I think what you said is quite
and having a job.
Yeah, and having a job and lots of responsibilities, like so-called material responsibilities. And what you said is that it sounds like a monk's life is quite true, because actually for being able to practice spirituality, it requires you actually to be celibate. It requires you to live in the forest away from everything and living simply. Because if you're practicing as mystic yoga or Ashtanga yoga process, or you're going the route of Gyan yoga, more applying your intelligence, so you're trying to refine it, you don't want to do things which is going to draw your consciousness to the external world. You want to reduce that as much as possible. So therefore it necessitates those restrictions. But with the schools of bhakti, of devotion, the focus is more on directing the energies of your activities to a different purpose. So the purpose is either we're trying to attain happiness independently from the whole. I'm trying to make my arrangements to make me happy, and I have my friends and things because I need them also to be happy myself. So therefore I need society, I need friends, I need relationships. So therefore these things, they serve my purposes. So it's like really at the core, this is what's going on. And but instead of doing that, it's like, okay, let me do that now for the Supreme. Now, how does that look practically in my life? Now, I've got a 14-month-old boy, and he's flippin' cute, you know. He's like, and sometimes he does something, and you know, it's a natural response for a parent just to be completely, almost intoxicated by their cuteness. I mean, they drive you up the wall, you want to throw them out the window, and then you just do something, and you just forget all about it, and just completely like, oh, he's so cute. And so in a way, I was thinking, wow, that's pretty intense, because what's happening is it's churning your attachment and increasing your attachment to that child, which is not actually your child, because it's just a person who's come through you, but they've not come to you. They come through you. Anyway, so the idea is that in the one sense, you get your false ego becomes more, you become more attached, and you become more entangled in material life. But now my meditation is, okay, first I was like a bit distant. I'm like, okay, I don't want to get attached to that. But I was thinking, but I have to. I can't just like renounce my son, the poor boy. So where I found the balance is thinking that, okay, this interaction of me is a natural interaction for a father to want to express and experience, like towards his son. And what it cultivates in me is more a sense of responsibility towards my son. And the whole purpose of having my son is actually not for me to get happiness from, but it's so that I can serve God through the son. And I can serve God through the son by trying to raise a child which is God conscious, which is conscious and God conscious, and that can actually become a saintly person, and a person that can actually change this world. So that is service to God, somebody who will become a devotee of the Lord. And so now I can utilize that natural kind of interaction of me being endeared to him to enhance the quality of my service and to make it easier for me to serve the soul. And to serve the soul who come into my care for now, to play the role as my son, and I'm playing the role of a father, but I know I'm not actually this soul's father. What I'm feeling is only the interaction between these two roles. But what I'm feeling is not actually factual. They're necessary for the service, but they're not factual in as far as my identity is concerned, which is I'm eternal spirit soul. I'm equal to this soul that's in this body of my son at the moment. And so that's powerful. So in that way, I can act, but at the same time be detached also. Same time, I can be completely detached. And what it relieves me from is the possibility that he might end up becoming a rascal one day, which is a big anxiety for parents, that your children become up to be miscreants and criminals. He could be that, I don't know. But because the purpose of raising this child is not so that I can get some kind of satisfaction and validation from. It frees me from that anxiety, which is a proof of the detachment, if I've applied it properly. then that will happen. And as soon as my attachment creeps in, I can feel it. I can feel the anxieties. I can feel the tension. I can feel my tendency to want to control him and the house and things. And that's like a red light for me, thinking, hey, you're not in the proper, alignment and God consciousness right now. You just need to recheck the facts of the situation quickly. And then I can step back and I'm like, okay. I'm actually thinking that I'm this, and this. That's illusion. Let's get back into reality, and then I can continue with my service nicely. And then immediately.
And what is that reality?
That reality is simply that I'm performing a service at the moment, which has manifested in the way it is now as me being a father, taking care of a wife and children, and and part of that service means I have to work. And the particular work I have been able to receive to do that is to be a teacher. And that also there's people in society I need to interact with, and there's these things. But that's the fact, is that I am not those things, but it's just a service I'm performing. It's a role I'm playing, and I'm enjoying it. I'm liking it as much as I like it. And the parts of it I don't like, it comes with the package, and I can appreciate that also. And
yes.
above and beyond that, I'm a spirit soul that actually has nothing to do with these things. And my happiness does not depend on any particular activity or result happening within these services, because the service is not for me. The service is for God. It's for His pleasure. It's not for my pleasure.
So it's keeping the balance, constantly keeping the balance, and any path can be a sacred path. Any action can be a sacred action.
Right, exactly. And that's what I love about this process, is it's the universality of it. It doesn't require you to change your religion or your theology or things like that. It's a universal principle that can be adopted by everybody, and it should be adopted by everybody, because why not? It's so beneficial, and it's so ecstatic to live in such a consciousness of divine servitude. Everything what you do, it actually gives purpose to your life, without which life really doesn't have much purpose. Yes. And that drives you to get up in the morning. So I can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning without
let's not get crazy, but yes.
Right. Maybe I have a little bit of fantasist in me. Okay, so now in chapter 15, it's also an interesting chapter. Krishna explains this metaphorical image of an upside down banyan tree. And he says the roots grow up and the trunk grows down. And that he's explaining these things, and it's this really mystical thing. And if you think about it, have you ever seen an upside down tree before? In reality, in the world, have you never seen an upside down tree?
No.
So I thought about this upside down tree, and then one day it just hit me. It's like, I've seen an upside down tree before. You just go look into the reflection on water in a pond, and then you can see an upside down tree. So that's exactly the situation of the material world, is that it is a reflection. Everything is upside down. It's an
image, it's a symbol.
Yeah. So and the reflection also indicates, it's proof that there is something factually beyond this mirage. And if you're in the desert and you see a mirage, you might say that, okay, it's false. But what that mirage means is there must be a real oasis somewhere. You can't have the mirage of an oasis without an oasis, a real oasis. So this world is like that mirage. It's a shadow world, and the shadow indicates there's something casting that shadow. So this banyan tree is explaining how the living entities have become so entangled in different kinds of activities, like speculative knowledge, fruitive activities, and then Krishna describes like the leaves are this and the branches are that, and these parts indicate these parts of the universe, and this is those parts of the universe, and different types of enjoyment that we have, and different things that happen. And he says that every living entity in this material world is struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. So this is a universal thing for every living entity in this material universe, is that this thing is happening, and they're entangled in this this material creation, and that everybody has acquired a body according to their desire. And whatever you've desired, there's a body that facilitates that desire. Like, and certain bodies are not capable of facilitating certain desires that we have. For example, if your desire is for sleeping, then you might spend your life sleeping a lot. And I've said this many times because I think it's such a good example. And but how long can you sleep at a stretch? maybe you sleep 24, 26 hours, but at some point, you're lying in your bed and you're actually sore and you're just like, you got to get up. When I was like very, very depressed many years ago, I slept 32 hours. That was the longest I managed. And the whole day, Wednesday did not happen. Went to sleep Tuesday and woke up on Thursday. So anyway, rather have a body of a bear, which is much better for sleeping. You can sleep 6 months at a time. Why not? You want to sleep, so then you get a body for sleeping. So but then Krishna also says, I believe it's in this chapter, he says, what you have to do is you can't actually untangle yourself from it. The only thing you can do is take the weapon of detachment and you just start hacking at this tree. You just start cutting off one thing after the next. You just whack at it. And knowledge is what will give you that strength to be able to cut those cords that are attaching us, to this upside down banyan tree. And then also it said towards
so finding the Maya, finding the illusion in this world.
Yes. Yeah, and meditating on the hook which is inside the worm that you're going for. This is yummy, tasty worm, and you're like going for the bait. But then you're meditating on, well, there's a hook in there, and if that this worm means this.
Another good analogy.
Yeah, you become thoughtful. You become thoughtful about that. So then you try not to fall for it, and then you still fall for it because your senses kind of force you to do it. But still, you're thoughtful, and you're thinking, okay, this is quite a tricky situation. My senses are here; they don't really want to cooperate with my intelligence. And then this is actually the work of somebody who's on the spiritual path: is they try to control their senses so they don't go for the bait.
For me, it's about still living my life. It's not about being austere. Austere in ways that it makes sense, but also in living my life and being able to enjoy the things that I enjoy, but also seeing it for what it is and not being caught in the desire of constantly wanting to be able to create something, still being able to have a joyous life and not living completely austere, but also not being able to get hooked by, I love that analogy, by the way, not get hooked by the pleasure of it and the desire of it and the chasing of it.
Yeah, there's actually very little that one has to give up. Like there's no way of engaging it, and particularly one is like intoxications. There's just no two ways about it. You have to stop intoxications because you can't advance beyond a certain point if you're numbing yourself, if you're intoxicating yourself. So that means alcohol, that means any kinds of drugs, nicotine, even like caffeine and stuff will affect you at a certain point. You'll feel that without caffeine, it's just better because I'm able to function better in my spiritual life. So that is there. And then with other things, it's a matter of regulation, as you said. You don't have to be austere. And it said that the principle of sobriety already covers the principle of austerity. So one of those pillars of spirituality, that austerity is actually one of those pillars. But by being sober, that's already austere enough. So you don't have to as you say, give up like all these kind of things. It's just like, just be sober. That's already austere enough for most people. And then deal with your stuff. That's austere. Okay.
Just a little footnote of just because it's there and there are different paths, is that when people are using substances to numb out and self-medicate and not feel is one thing, but there's also a shamanic experience where you're using substances to be able to align with self and come to God. Almost every Aboriginal in history had some kind of plant or mushroom or bark or something that they used to be able to change their experience of reality. And it was always deemed in being coming to God or coming to creation and learning vision quests and becoming one. So there is something to be said for the shamanic experience, but it's also, once again, you need to be conscious and actually know what you're doing. And it does come to a point where generally as you get older, or that you've had the experiences that you've had and it's opened the doors that it has, that you move away from that. There is an evolution from that.
I appreciate you saying that, because taking of those plant medicines, indeed, they can be very powerful. but they're only the preliminary stages of those paths. And as you correctly said, at some stage one actually moves past them, because they're teacher plants, some people call them like that. And but you have to graduate the class also. You can't just hang around in the class semester of semester. You have to take the lessons of the teacher and move on. And it's also well known that advanced shamans actually don't take those plant medicines themselves, because they don't require it. So that is also known.
It's kind of interesting. Bashar had something to say about this. A channeled entity that I listen to from time to time, and somebody was asking him about cannabis, and he said, well, you virtually really don't have to do cannabis more than once and get the frequency and then be able to use that from that point on.
Yeah.
And that's not something that I was particular. The substances that I partake in, I've definitely done more than once. And so they asked more questions about it, and he said, well, let me put it this way. How many times do you need to do grade 7?
Yes.
So, which I found kind of interesting. So it points in that direction.
Yeah.
It's not revealing much about my life, but I do understand the thought process.
Yes. I appreciate that. And
I'm not giving up. I'm not becoming celibate either. Until I'm forced to.
Yeah. According to Ayurveda, marijuana is actually classified as a toxic plant, and it is classified in the same category as datura. So that's what, according to Ayurveda. And every single Ayurvedic remedy that uses cannabis, that cannabis is first prepared in such a way to remove those effects, because it increases the tama-guna. It increases mode of ignorance. That's what it does. And so that's why your thoughts become slower, because you put more mud in there. So then it slows everything down, and then you can see everything kind of in slow motion, and you can kind of, think about things a bit more, I guess. But but this is according to Ayurveda. That's what I'm saying, and Ayurveda is pretty legit. So you cook it in a certain way with certain oils. They use ghee sometimes, and then they remove that, and then that is used in small quantities in some medicines that they treat. But it's never used as it is used by people, for example, being smoked. There's no Ayurvedic prescriptions for smoking marijuana. And anyway, but we can move on then to the 16th chapter. And I'm just briefly going to say, this one is called the divine and demoniac nature, or you could even say the godly and ungodly qualities. And it's just describing it's more for myself, like a reflection where I can go into myself and I can analyze my qualities, and I can categorize, how much of them fall under godly qualities and how much of them are ungodly. And then, it puts me to work on that. So that's as much as I'll say from this chapter. Because he speaks just a lot about that.
Can you give me an example of godly and ungodly characteristics?
Well, let's see.
Mostly the ungodly.
Yeah, let's say godly qualities: fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, performance of sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity, and then things like that, modesty and steady determination, forgiveness. These are godly qualities. And then ungodly qualities would be pride, arrogance, harshness, anger, ignorance. And then they're talking about the different effects that happen due to these different qualities. And it says that, like, for example, the demoniac or the ungodly do not know what is to be done and what is not to be done. Neither cleanliness nor proper behavior nor truth is found in them. So these are qualities.
It sounds like the kleshas and avidya.
Yeah, they're related. They're definitely related. Avidya means ignorance, and then and they also say the type of things which these people who are ungodly preach, and they philosophical convictions. It says here, according to Krishna, they say that this world is unreal with no foundation, no God in control. They say it is produced of sex desire and has no cause other than lust. So they're saying this is all that it is about. This is all it is about. We can see that this Western society is pretty much driven on sex, and everything is promoted with sex. And they've completely oversexed everybody to think that this is the prime goal of life, and they're using that to control everybody. So this is the ungodly people who are utilizing this lower nature of people in this age in this way.
Yes.
So
And fear, and because Bashar also calls the frequency of our society currently is the masters of lack. So that's what we're here to learn, is to live not from lack. Our baseline is lack. Not good enough, not enough of everything, that it creates competition and comparison, etc.
Oh, yes, one amazing thing, I'd forgotten about this. They say that this is the ungodly. Following such conclusions, the demoniac who are lost to themselves, who have no intelligence, engage in unbeneficial, horrible work meant to destroy the world. And the Sanskrit word they use is ugraha karma, which literally translates as angry work. Angry work, angry work. Like if you think of a combustion engines, that's ugraha karma. It's like all these explosions, and it's a very violent form of utilization of energy. And it's very dangerous, actually. And it's covered nicely behind the soft dashboard. So you're sitting in your car completely unaware of this thing, of these explosions right in front of your face. It's so that's all ugraha karma. And then obviously the pollution and all the oil just needed to make the car. Yes, they believe that to gratify the senses is the prime necessity of human civilization. Thus, until the end of life, their anxiety is immeasurable. Be bound by a network of hundreds of thousands of desires and absorbed in lust and anger, they secure money by illegal means for sense gratification. And this one last part I want to read, I think is quite interesting. The demoniac person thinks, so much wealth do I have today, and I will gain more according to my schemes. So much is mine now, and it will increase in the future more and more. He is my enemy, and I have killed him, and my other enemies will also be killed. I am the Lord of everything. I am the enjoyer. I am perfect, powerful, and happy. I am the richest man, surrounded by aristocratic relatives. There is none so powerful and as happy as I am. I shall perform sacrifices. I shall give some charity, and thus I shall rejoice. In this way, such persons are deluded by ignorance. So this kind of
thing. Yes, and it's also describing superiority.
Yeah. Narcissist.
Yes. So, beautiful.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is this is describing consciousness. This is describing a consciousness which you perceive by dint of the actions that the person performs or oneself. It's not that necessarily this dialogue actually happens, inside the mind, but by their actions you can understand this is actually what's going on in their heart. This type of thinking is actually what's driving them. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. So then in the 17th...
Something that I find interesting about energy, I liked your analogy about that, and noticing what's happening now is all this work around electromagnetic energy.
Yeah.
And like the speed trains that they have now that go over 300 miles an hour, and that they are levitating, that they're actually using electromagnetic to lift it. So there's absolutely no friction, and there's no waste. So yes. And what did you call that karma again? What's the Sanskrit word for angry? Say that again.
Ugraha karma.
I'm not going to say that.
Ugraha. Ugraha.
Ugraha.
Yes.
Ugraha.
Even the word itself sounds angry, doesn't it? Ugraha.
I'm very angry. Angry.
Yeah. I'm so ugraha now. Okay. So there's 2 chapters left. We're at 48 minutes, but it's I think it's going good.
Let's go.
So in the 17th chapter, it's entitled The Divisions of Faith, and more modes of nature is being described here. Like in the 14th chapter, when they're looking at the modes, they were kind of giving more a little bit of I would say an overview. Like they would say, like I was saying, the binding force of the different modes. Like in mode of goodness, you're bound by happiness, satisfaction, by knowledge and superiority. Mode of passion binds you by, attachment to your different activities that you want to perform, and also your desires. And mode of ignorance by your suffering. They also say by madness and sleep and laziness. And then you can detect the different symptoms, and they also describe the different destinations after death, and also the results of your action in the 14th chapter. But in the 17th chapter, they're giving further categorizations of the modes. For example, the different types of food that are under the modes, which I'll read here. They say that juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. That's the mode of goodness. Mode of passion is too bitter, too sour, too salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning.
Spicy.
Spicy is mode of passion. It's chili. A mode of ignorance, if it's prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten, and food that is tasteless, decomposed, and putrid, and food consisting of remnants and untouchable things. So the exception is if you actually have performed, if you have cooked something and offered it in sacrifice, in some kind of ritual, spiritual process, like as I was explaining in the previous talks, how everything that I cook, gets offered as an offering, to Krishna, and in that way there's an exchange. That is actually spiritual. So that even though if I eat that after 3 hours, because of the spiritual quality of that food, it actually becomes relieved from these 3 modes. So,
okay.
And then they say the effects of such foods, they say that like mode of goodness foods increase the duration of your life. It gives you strength and health and happiness. Mode of passion foods just causes distress, misery, and disease. And then mode of ignorance food also gives infection and disease. They're talking about the different sacrifices performed, different types of austerity. I think this one is interesting. Mode of goodness austerities is performed with transcendental faith, without expecting material benefits and only for the sake of the Supreme. Austerities in the mode of passion is performed out of pride for the sake of gaining respect, and is neither permanent nor stable. And mode of ignorance austerities is performed out of foolishness with self-torture and to destroy or injure others. So inflicting self-pain is a mode of ignorance austerity. There are some traditions who do that. They beat themselves. This is a mode of ignorance activity.
Yeah.
And then charity in the different modes. Yeah,
I've never seen that before. Yeah.
No.
Thank you.
So
I like that.
Charity in the mode of goodness is if you give it out of duty, without expectation or return. You give it at the proper time and place and to a worthy person. In the mode of passion, you give it with some expectation of some return, and also with the desire for further results, and also in a grudging mood. And the mode of ignorance is performed at an impure place, at an improper time, to an unworthy person, without attention and respect. Okay. Then they describe. So these things are being talked about in the 17th chapter. It's called the divisions of faith, and it's basically how your.
What of faith? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
The what of faith?
Divisions of faith. So
divisions.
It's describing according to your conception, which is determined by the mode that you're predominated by. You're going to interact with the world in a certain way, and this is describing those activities and the results of those activities, which are governed by the mode. And as one can see, mode of goodness produces desirable results. Mode of passion is like mixed results, but it continues your kind of same level of vibration, and mode of ignorance just drags you down and down and down. It just makes you suffer. And then in the 18th chapter, this is one of my favorite chapters personally. It's the perfection of renunciation. It's the conclusion of the Gita. So it's talking about what does real renunciation look like, and what does it mean to actually be renounced. And then Arjuna he asks in the beginning, he says, what is the purpose of renunciation and of the renounced order of life, and what is the distinction between them? So Krishna is explaining that it's not just one who has given up interacting with things that is renounced, because within himself his mind still dwells on the sense objects. So that means he's not actually renounced, only externally he's renounced, and he's called a palgun vairagi. It means he's a pretender. He's somebody who's renounced, and he's actually just pretending. He's cheating himself, and he's cheating others. Inside he's still doing it. Like there are many Babajis in India where they go out of their house, they put on the orange robe, they sit somewhere and they beg, and then maybe they're smoking some chillums, and then when the day's work is complete, they've got some mistresses which then they go and sleep with. And then like that, they're just doing it as a profession. They're cheaters. And so the people like this exist.
Yes.
So in this chapter, some more of the modes of nature are again being described. For example, when you're performing your duties or giving up, renouncing your duties, what does that look like in the different modes? So the mode of goodness, renunciation, is if you perform your prescribed duties only because it ought to be done, and you become detached from the results of those activities, that is renunciation. Like, for example,
Yes.
my duty, I have a duty as a father now, so I should just do it because I'm supposed to do it. That's detachment, not because I want to attain something. So that's real renunciation. And then, yeah, and also that you renounce all material association. That means I don't mix my consciousness with all these interactions of these different things, you know, that are related to my duties. I just do my duties. I do what I need to do, and I don't get more involved with material stuff than I need to. And as far as my duties or my service is related.
So not being connected to the end result, but given the role that I've chosen, I'm doing the right thing, whatever the right thing is.
Yes, exactly. So in the mode of passion is when you renounce your prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort. It's because I don't like it, so I'm not going to do it. That's mode of passion. It's just because it's too difficult or whatever. This is a child. You ask them to do some simple task, and then they start doing it like whimsically, and then they're like, I can't. And then they want to renounce it just because it's just inconvenient for them. They want to do something else. So that's mode of passion. And in mode of ignorance, you renounce your prescribed duties because of illusion, because you don't know what's going on, and you just give it up. So then knowledge is also described. So knowledge in the mode of goodness is by which one undivided spiritual nature.
Yes.
Sorry? Okay.
I got a fair amount of that in my life.
Right. So knowledge in the mode of goodness is knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms. So you're able to perceive the oneness in everything. Not just like, oh, everything is one, but you can actually perceive it. And that, that is proven by how equal you are to everybody and everything. Yeah. So you're not just saying it, but you should be able to see it like that. So knowledge in the mode of passion is
experiential, yeah,
is knowledge by which one sees that in every different body there is a different type of living entity. It means you think that you're not connected in some way. You think you're two disconnected entities existing separately from each other. So you're thinking like that. And in the mode of ignorance is knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as all in all, or without knowledge of the truth, or which is knowledge which is very meager. So there's some other things which I'm not going to go all through. They talk about different types of actions, like what is your motivation, impetus for action, and the types of actions that you actually do, and what guides what you do and don't do, and then the modes govern that. And then also how you perform those actions. They're talking about the different types of determination. This one is quite interesting. In the mode of goodness, determination is determination that is unbreakable, sustained with steadfastness by yoga practice, and controls the activities of mind, life, and senses. In the mode of passion, determination is one who holds fast to fruitive results in religion, economic development, and sense gratification. So the only thing that keeps you going is the thought that you're going to get a paycheck at the end of the month. So that's determination in the mode of passion. You're just thinking about the result. You're just thinking, I'm working really, really hard right now, but it's going to be worth it because I'm going to be able to buy that car finally. And then you just like tough it through. So that's mode of passion, determination. And in the mode of ignorance, determination is a person who cannot go beyond dreaming. They just think about the things they want to do, but they never actually do it. And it's determination, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness, and illusion. So, speaking about good things and saving the world, but then you never end up doing anything. And then finally, they're talking about happiness, which is in mode of goodness, is just like poison in the beginning and nectar at the end, and it awakes one to self-realization. And happiness in mode of passion is derived from contact of the senses with their objects. And it appears as nectar at first, but poison at the end. And in the mode of ignorance, happiness is blind to self-realization delusion from beginning to end, and it arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion. So this kind of goes towards the just past the middle of this chapter. By the way, I've got a really nice table I'm looking at that they've categorized these things. I can send the link to you. It's with these different modes. It's very, very useful study tool if one wants to look at that. I'll put that in the link in the video comments thing below.
Yeah,
as well.
send that to me, please.
Yeah, and then at the end, Krishna is saying, but the perfection of renunciation is actually that if one just whatever you do, you just depend on God for everything. You depend on Him for your protection. You depend on Him for your sustenance and for guidance. And in that way, you just do what you can do, and then you just depend on Him. And that's actual renunciation. Is where you've given up. You're just doing your duty.
And it's up to me.
Sorry?
I'm the only one working for me, is me. Everything lands on my shoulders. I have to do everything, as opposed to trusting the design.
Yes.
Or in your word, that Krishna is in control. And
Yes.
anything that actually occurs is for my betterment.
Exactly. And then he says this very famous verse, Sarva Dharman Pariteja Mamikam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarva Papabhyo Mokshayishami Masuchaha, which means abandon all varieties of dharma, Sarva Dharman, which you could also say abandon all varieties of religions and processes and paths, and just surrender unto me. I will free you from all your karmas. Don't fear. He says, like, there's nothing to be afraid of. I will sort you out. All you need to do is place yourself under my protection and my guidance, the Supreme Spirit, God. And then I will take care. And this is the supreme level of renunciation, where you're not acting on your own strength anymore, because you've realized that my strength is actually limited. It is very limited. This material ocean is very vast, and the oceans are knocking everybody back and forth. So why not take shelter by the supremely powerful and the source of everything, from whom this little ocean, this entire material ocean, seems like a tiny little puddle in the ground made by the hoof of a calf, you know? So then you just take shelter by this person, and then very easily you can cross beyond this ocean of darkness and attain, your spiritual self-realization. So in this way, this is renunciation, is that you're depending completely on God, which is what sannyas is about also. So that's where it ends. Actually, after that, then it ends. Then Krishna says, well, I've now told you all these things, Arjuna. Now you can do as you like. Fight, don't fight. It's up to you to choose. I've said what I wanted to say. So Krishna says, now you do as you like. So he gave him his free will. He didn't say you must fight. He just said, well, do with this knowledge what you want. So this is what he said.
Now free will.
Yeah.
That's a very long conversation to have in a chariot waiting for a war.
yeah, it is. It's 800 verses in the Bhagavad Gita. I don't know how long they would have spoken it, but they're self-controlled warriors. So I think maybe, it was an auspicious place also. So
beautiful.
Yeah. So then the Bhagavad Gita concludes like that, and then some statements are made about. Where Arjuna and Krishna were there together, they're always victory and will be there, and all auspiciousness will always be there, which basically means anybody who also takes these teachings of the Bhagavad Gita to heart means that they are in the association of Krishna and Arjuna always. And in that way, they will attain success and all good fortune and auspiciousness, because their consciousness is associated in that same realm and like that. So you can get blessings from these personalities like that. And then the Bhagavad Gita ends on that note. Right, so then that is the summary of the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. 1 hour and 3 minutes.
Wow. How long?
1 hour and 3 minutes.
Wow, okay. All right, so yeah, there was a few comments that I bit my tongue on, so especially in the end there, and just for time. So we will have a look at those maybe in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you very much again, Priyat. Very, very much. Love and light, my friend.
Haribol.
We'll talk soon.